Progressive fantasy is a fantasy subgenre where the story typically focuses heavily on our characters increasing in power and skill over time. Now these stories are often, you see characters trained to learn new techniques, finding ways to improve their existing skills, analyzing skills of their opponents, and are gaining literal or figurative levels of power. Now the progression you hear in this subgenre typically refers to the actual power progression. It's less to do with wealth, noble rank, etc. It can hit on that a bit, but it's mostly about the actual power rankings of our characters. Now this subgenre heavily overlaps with things like lit RPG, game lit, shonen battle anime. It's very similar in that regards, and it can kind of fall into any of those things and overlap in any which way. Today I'll be taking y'all through a few series I've read over the past couple of months. I've been really into this subgenre lately, and I couldn't get enough, honestly. So I'm gonna go over, a few that I have read, and maybe even some honorable mentions that are loved by a good bit of people, but I personally may not have gotten to just yet. Alright, the first one and the biggest one, which I'm sure a good bit of y'all have heard of, even if you really aren't into the fantasy subgenre of everything. But that is Cradle by Will White. This is the most popular one out there, I'd argue. Now, I won't talk about it too much because, like I just said, most of y'all probably kind of already know the gist of it. But I'll give a little bit of a summary. So, this story follows Lyndon, an unsold who's not allowed to learn the sacred arts of his clan due to his deficiency. Due to this misfortune, Lyndon has to use and scheme whatever possible means to gain victories over his obstacles. And that he does. So this is an epic 12-book series that actually just wrapped up. I didn't finish it just yet. I'm going to get to it. But, what is there to say about Cradle? I mean, it's everything. It's action-packed. It's funny. It's so enjoyable with such well-written and well-rounded characters. It feels like you're going 100 miles an hour as you're taken through this story, and it flows so well. I mean, it's just so awesome, honestly. I mean, once again, kind of like I referred to with progressive fantasy, it's very anime shonen like, think of your Naruto, Dragon Ball Z kind of thing, and it's like that. It just gives you more depth, obviously, with being a book. So, it gives so much more insight to how, he's progressing and everything like that. But, it's a great story. It's extremely expansive. I mean, the world of Cradle is definitely the biggest one that I've read. And the world building is insane, and it's just so enjoyable to look at every single nuance that Mr. Will has created. I mean, I burned through these books, and they're pretty short too. I think, the longest one might be like 400 pages, 500. You could eat through these. It's definitely one of my favorites. But that's that. So yeah, Cradle's the big, epic 12-book series, but I wanted to just get that one out of the way because I actually don't really think you should start with that if you're new to this subgenre. It is kind of the upper echelon of things, kind of the peak of everything. I mean, it's the biggest, it's the most expansive, biggest world, most world building. I actually recommend you kind of warm up with some other things because, Cradle, still after everything I've read, it probably is in my top. So yeah, now that we got that big one out of the way, I'll give you a couple other ones that you might not have heard of, which kind of, you know, it might let you put your toe in the water of progressive fantasy. Next up is Iron Prince. Now this one is pretty popular as well. There is only one book out. There is a second one that's supposed to be coming out. I actually think it's supposed to be coming out soon, but not sure. So to give you all a little summary, Iron Prince follows Raiden Ward, born weak, sickly, and small, afflicted with a painful disease, and abandoned by his parents because of it. Ray has to fight tooth and nail for every minor advantage in life, and it won't be for nothing. Raiden Ward will become a god. Now, Iron Prince is a bit of a mix, a bit of a sci-fi fantasy mix to me. Now, whereas, spoiler alert, most of progressive fantasy, you kind of know where your character is going to end up, so to speak. You know, I mean, you assume they're going to keep gaining power and be strong. But with Cradle, you know, it's such a slow burn, and you kind of just really taken through everything slowly getting stronger, this and that. Now, with Iron Prince, it's implied. Now, that's not really a spoiler. If you read the book, you understand right away. It's very heavily implied. Obviously, in the blurb, he will become a god. Now, that doesn't take away from it. I mean, you assume already. But, you know, this one, I'm not going to call it... I don't mean this in like a bad way of saying it's like more basic and traditional. Kind of like, once again, I'm going to reference this a lot. Kind of similar to shonen battle anime, you know, it has like a tournament arc of sorts. And it's kind of just like that, you know, it's kind of the series. You know, just school setting, 1v1 fights kind of thing. And that's kind of the vibe you get from that. And it's awesome. I mean, once again, it's just so interesting seeing the advantages that slowly come up as our underdog becomes way stronger. So yeah, I mean, I really like what they did here, especially with the sci-fi mix of things, you know, a little bit more of a technology focus on this series, and you know, it's awesome. I mean, I really thought it was a great story. I didn't love the writing, but it doesn't really need to be great writing because the concept of it was just so enjoyable. So yeah, that's Iron Prince. Coming in next is Bastion by Phil Tucker. Now, this follows the story of Scorio, who is what you call a great soul, a person reborn after death to serve as a soldier against the deepest parts of the pits of hell. Now, this one is truly a bit different. Once again, Cradle, Iron Prince, underdog, start their way up the climb to being the greatest, whatever. I won't go into this too much because it is really a big driving force of the story, but this one's kind of, once again, you know, almost implied. You know, he is strong, but how does he get to that? And has he been there before? This one has a really dark beginning, which was really fun. I mean, the first half is not what you'd expect at all. Kind of, you know, once again, it flips on its head a bit. And I really enjoyed that dark undertone of it, you know, for our character to actually really struggle. But, you know, this one's cool too. I actually think this is one of my favorite kind of power systems of these. It is truly just like Pokemon evolution type style.
Oh, what's the matter, Charmander?
Charmander looks funny.
It's evolving.
That's kind of how the progressive fantasy of this is handled, and it's awesome. I mean, it's such an interesting thing to read and imagine, and I think this would be great animated. So I mean, yeah, I mean, you know, the characters in this are right. You know, there's some funny moments. Scario's a bit deep, but not too much. It's nothing crazy. I mean, you're really not going to get too much character depth with these series, especially when they're a bit shorter. So this one there's 2 books out now. I've read the 2. I don't know if Mr. Phil plans on this being a trilogy, but this is one of those 2 where, you know, I'm judging it right now based on those 2. But there's a lot of room with this. He could go anywhere, as you kind of heard, you know, the pits of hell, and it goes a bit deeper than that, literally. So I think he could go anywhere with this, and the evolutions and the rankings can only get better. I think this is actually, you know, it follows Cradle's style of like literal rankings, where they give it an actual name, and I think it's a really, really cool concept that Mr. Phil Tucker did for this. So yeah, I definitely recommend this one as well. I burned through this, and you know, that's another trend. You could just burn through these books. They're so dang quick and fast paced. It's so great. Okay, and then we have the Mage Errant series by John Bierce. This is an 8-book series following the life of Hugh, a boy with it seems to be no talent for magic, attending a magical school. You know, so this one is a bit more traditional. It's still progressive fantasy, but it's also just more of a typical. It leans more towards like typical fantasy. I feel like traditional, you know, slow build kind of story. I still have 2 books left, so I'm not sure if it ramps up a lot, but so far, you know, it's more about the characters, honestly. I mean, each side character in this is, I mean, they could be the main character. It's, you know, John Bierce does a great thing here with the characters and gives them a lot of depth. You know, Hugh, this one's interesting again with how they kind of build it up, whereas most of these other ones are, MC is your typical kind of hot-headed extrovert. Oh, I want to be the best, want to be this, and Hugh really doesn't want to do all that. Honestly, he's not super driven, which is interesting to read about, as you know, he's never really pushing to be the strongest. He was just always the weakest, and he still kind of stays in that state of mind, which is definitely an interesting curveball. You know, he doesn't feel like he earns it from kind of the vibe I'm getting. But I mean, who doesn't love a magical school? It's fun, you know. The magic's interesting. I can't say it's my favorite kind of power system, but it's definitely fun. You know, it's definitely intricate in a way that you know, you can kind of have affinities. You know, it's very, very general in that source. You know, if you've ever played video, it's very similar, like a video game style, where, you know, you kind of pick your attribute kind of thing. Yeah, it's definitely a solid one if you're looking for more of the traditional fantasy style with a heavier focus on the progressive subgenre. It's definitely worth it. Wouldn't be my first pick, if I'm being honest, but you know, you may think differently. Okay, the final one I have here is Beware of Chicken by Casual Former. Now, so far we've gone over some series that, you know, they're a bit funny here and there, obviously, like most are, but this one's straight cozy, comedic, Asian inspired progressive fantasy. Now this one caught me off guard Oh wait, okay. So a little bit about it. So this is about a cultivator who realizes he shouldn't live to cultivate. He should use his cultivation to live. He goes against the trope of cultivators taking from the world to become stronger. And this person wants to go off and live his life to be a farmer. Now, there are 2 books in this so far. I think there's a 3rd one coming soon as well. Don't know how many he plans on this being. But man, this caught me off guard. Like I was saying, it's so in your face. I was not expecting the writing style, just kind of the brutalness of it. You know, just a lot of cursing, and it had me like, you know, had me giggling within the first couple pages. And man, this is just hilarious. It is so dang funny. And you know, it's still progressive fantasy, obviously. Our character may want to be a farmer, but you know, that doesn't, just because it's progressive fantasy and our main character isn't the one progressing, doesn't mean it's not happening. So all I'm gonna say is animals fighting anime style. Now, you know, I've mentioned it with every single one so far. Well, mostly every single one. This one is literal, just like a light novel, manga. Yeah, I mean, even the art is very similar. And that's awesome. I mean, it still gives it that little bit of a difference because it's a bit more in depth than most light novels and stuff like that, which I really enjoyed. But you know, once again, burn through it. It's hilarious. The powers are interesting. Very, very loose magic system, as you kind of heard. You know, cultivation, so to speak. But you know, the fighting is definitely interesting. Some interesting fight scenes. Not what you're expecting at all, and that's the best way to describe this. Well, that's a lie. It's literally called Beware of Chicken. You probably know what was happening. But this one was probably my favorite one besides Cradle, just because of how much it caught me off guard. I mean, alright guys, so those are the ones that I've read through and I recommend. So these next 2, I'm gonna just kind of throw them out there. And that's gonna be Mother of Learning and Dungeon Crawler Coral. Those are huge ones. You might have heard of them. I definitely recommend you do check them out. Mother of Learning, you know, I haven't read enough to put on this list. I've read both of these a little, but not enough to just, you know, I can't really talk about it. But Mother of Learning, you know, it's kind of that same magic style as the Mage series, a bit more in depth. But from what I've read, you know, it was just a little bit, I was kind of reading them side by side and it didn't make sense. But I've heard that one's great. A lot of people love it. And then Dungeon Crawler Coral, that's a huge one. I'm actually just reading that now. Don't know much about it yet. So, you know, I've heard people like getting emotional over this. I thought it was just straight comedy. I mean, it sounds, I didn't pick this up right away because I thought it would be too silly. But then you have people crying over here, so I'm gonna have to get into that one. But definitely, you know, if y'all have heard of those, if you've already read them, let me know what you think. If you think, based on my list, if I like it, and if you've read those, go ahead and check out the ones I recommended as well. But that's really all I have for y'all today. Hope you enjoy. Let me know what you've read. If you have any more recommendations, of course. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. I'll see y'all next time.